Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you again. It's been a while since we had a chance to speak face to face. There's just been so much in-game content that I wanted to make, especially with the release of Season 2, which is incidentally what I want to speak about in this video. This is going to be my full review for the new season. It's a video that would have probably been a lot more popular if I made it the day after Season 2 dropped, but that would also have meant that the video would have been bullshit because I wanted to do extensive testing, try out the new characters, wall bounce, get a feel for what's happened to online before I actually spoke about it in depth. But now I feel like I've done my homework and I'm ready to talk about it with you guys. Before we jump into this, I just want to give you a quick but big thank you for being here and for supporting the channel. There's been a lot of excitement in the global community over the last couple of weeks, especially since the release of Season 2. It seems more people are enjoying the game than ever, and it's also meant that this channel is growing at a faster rate than ever, so it's very exciting. I'm so happy for you to be here and to be enjoying the game, so thank you very much for that. But let's start talking about the content. So my initial impression of Season 2 was that I was surprised by the amount of content that it actually contained. I was expecting something like 2 to 3 characters, maybe some minor balance changes, stages and costumes, but we're going to get 6 new characters, which is huge. New characters is a really big thing in Tekken because they take a lot of time to make and they have big impacts on the metagame. So that's very exciting, and that's the content that is continuously going to roll out over the next couple of months, and we're going to keep on talking about that as it happens. But we also saw pretty extensive balance changes to a majority of the characters in the cast. We had new moves added to a lot of characters as well, so it was a much larger scope than I was expecting. Now, my hope for Season 2 was, I had this feeling in Season 1, during the last months of Season 1, that especially the online environment, but also the tournament scene, had sort of boiled down and been reduced to a pretty specific meta game, where a lot of people were gravitating to a small number of certain characters. And while it was still a lot of fun, because it's Tekken and it's always exciting, it didn't have as much variety as you might want from a game that has such a big and fun roster, and it was starting to feel a little bit samey. So I wanted Season 2 to breathe some new life into that, create a little bit more variety, and deal with some of the more annoying balance issues that we were having with a couple of characters. And so I'm going to tell you whether or not I think it's achieved that. But before we do that, I think I want to talk about some of the other minor changes to the game. If we're first of all going to talk a little bit about the updated UI, I think it's been a tremendous success. The new menus look great. The stage select screen has seen a huge improvement. But I think the big star, which is actually a pretty major change in my opinion to the UI, is the progress bar or experience bar that they've added to the online ranked environment. Online is already a very frustrating game mode, but it is also, in my opinion, the most important game mode that we have in the game, because it's where 99.9% of all the competitive games of Tekken take place, and so it's where you have to create the most ergonomic environment because we spend so much time in there. And one of the frustrating aspects of that game mode was that it was difficult to know when a promotion or demotion was coming, and it could make it difficult to motivate yourself to keep playing. But now that there's a very clear point system and an improved UI telling you how you're doing, it's so much more easy to motivate yourself to keep on pushing, and it makes the game mode feel a lot more rewarding. It's a tiny change that I think has actually made a big impact, and I really like it. If we're going to keep on talking about online, there's been updates to the point systems to make the game mode a little bit more forgiving in terms of promotions. I think during the first week or so of Season 2, it became a lot easier to rank up, because not only did we have these changes, but there was also so many people trying out new characters, the people who weren't really used to the balance changes yet, so it was a very fluid environment. And I feel that has cauterized a little bit, and it is now pretty difficult again to really push for higher ranks. But I think on average, people are at least 1 rank higher on their main characters than they were before the season dropped. if you don't account for balance changes, obviously. I mean, characters who saw extensive nerfs, for example, like Kazumi, might actually be doing a lot worse in the new season because their characters aren't as good. But if you sort of disregard that fact, I think on average, if you were yo-yoing between 3 different ranks before, and you spent most of your time on that middle rank, and you were winning and losing and going between them, I think you're going to float somewhere on the higher end of that spectrum in the new season, because you have to lose a little bit more than you're winning. Instead of 50-50ing it to actually get demoted. And I think that's a fine change. I think it's good for online to be a little bit more forgiving and a little bit more of an ergonomic and easy to be in environment, because it can be such a frustrating environment. And if you look at some of the best players in the world when they stream, even they will you know, yell and break things, because online can really piss you off. And so it's good for that to have been had a sort of quality of life change to it, and I think that's very positive. I think the next thing I want to talk about are the actual balance changes to the characters in the roster. And this is a big one for me. I think we saw pretty substantial buffs to a couple of characters, pretty substantial nerfs to very few characters, and then just sort of adjustments back and forth to a majority of the cast. I think that there were a couple of characters that needed to have pretty extensive nerfs, but that's just my opinion. Off the top of my head, I think Xiao Yu, Dragunov, and Devil Jin definitely needed to be looked at, and you can make an argument, in my opinion, for Jack 7 and Brian Fury too. But again, those are just opinions. I don't think those characters were brought to the point where I would have liked them to be. The adjustments were kind of minor on the whole, and I think they're going to enjoy a lot of popularity going forward. But it was definitely a push in the right direction. If we're going to talk about buffs, I think whether or not you really like the balance changes in this new season is ultimately going to come down to whether or not they improved or made weaker your favorite characters. That's going to be the big bias when we talk about this. And in my case, my absolute favorite character of all time in Tekken, which is Miguel, saw some pretty substantial buffs and is a lot stronger now. So that's a great thing for me, and I absolutely love that. But then a couple of other characters that I really love got some pretty strange changes, in my opinion. I think Kazumi is a very different character right now, and I haven't really decided whether or not I think she's bad or a lot worse or not, because I think she needs to be played in a different way that I haven't figured out yet. But the changes to her seem odd to me on the whole, and I feel the same way about Elisa, for example. So yeah, I think if you only play one character and you love that character and that saw some substantial buffs, you're going to love the new season. And if it went in the other direction, then maybe you're a little bit sad. But that can also be a big motivating factor to try out new things and play new characters. And that was my main hope for the season, as I mentioned in the intro. So overall, I think the balance changes are a success, and very few of them make no sense and seem very odd. Most of them make quite a lot of sense. Some of the new moves make a lot of sense, and I kind of like them too. But there are a couple of question marks that I have. I would like to talk to a developer about why did you decide to do this specific thing to Elisa, for example, and why did you decide that this was the change that was going to bring, you know, Devil Jin to a more reasonable spot, or you know, something like that. But overall, I think it's a success, and when I've been playing online, exactly what I was hoping for has been happening. There are so many more characters that pop up frequently online. I've seen a lot more Master Raven, obviously the new characters in the roster. There are people playing Gigas and all the rest of it. So it's a more fun environment. It's sort of popping right now. It's sizzling. Online is very fun. I'm loving the new moves, and yeah, it's a much more fun environment to play online right now, and it really has breathed new life into that environment. So I think that's a huge success for the new season. If we're going to talk about new game mechanics next, we only really got one new major game mechanic, which was the wall bounce. And if you want to hear my full thoughts on that, I made a separate video on it a couple of days ago, where I talked about my thoughts about that in depth. Ultimately, I think it's a cool change. I think it's really fun when it happens. It feels great, but I think they were scared about it becoming a balance issue. So they made it a little bit too weak. And right now it's weak enough that it's never going to create major balance issues for the game, but it's also not going to be a major factor in competitive play. It's almost a cosmetic change. Not really. but almost, because it's a little bit too specific for a thing to have happen. But then again, maybe that's fine. You know, there are cool things that only happen on occasion in Tekken, and those are moments to get excited. So maybe that was actually an intentional design choice. It might well have been. So while it's not a huge factor for the game and the competitive environment, I think it's definitely not a bad change. It's just a little bit of maybe a wasted opportunity. The next thing and the last major thing I want to talk about in the new season is new characters. We got Lei and Anna, and the first thing that needs to be said about those two characters is that they have some of the best presentation we've ever seen. I think both characters look fantastic and animate fantastic. They are just a joy to watch, and it's exciting when they pop up online and get to play against them. You know, because they're new, but also because they look and feel so fantastic. From a gameplay perspective, there are a couple of things that I find a little bit annoying about maybe specifically Anna, but you know that I have always had a little bit of a bug up my ass when it comes to low launchers, and it's fine that she has a couple because many characters do. One thing that I found a little bit strange is that her version of the snake edge, the down back 3, is not minus enough on block that you can launch punish it with characters who have slow while standing launchers, so you can actually launch punish that from while standing if you're playing Kazumi, for example. And it's very popular right now online because she's new. Kazumi has already seen extensive nerfs and she can't launch the down back 3, so it just makes that matchup completely like a really stressful and difficult for her. So yeah, I think that's a little bit unfortunate, but you know, this is gonna change. People are gonna start playing these characters in all kinds of different ways, and ultimately people are gonna migrate back to their own favorite characters, and only people who decide to actually main Anna and Lei are gonna stick with them. So that's gonna change a little bit. So I have a couple of question marks in terms of the gameplay design of those characters and if it's been really conducive to a fun online environment, but I think they look great. I've played them a little bit and I've enjoyed both characters quite a lot. I think especially Lei is really interesting and has a lot of really cool things going on about him, but he also has some Xiao Yu vibes where he can be super annoying to run into. So, you know, it's going to come down to your personal taste. But I can say that I think the presentation has been top-notch, and it makes me so excited for more new characters. If we're going to talk about the 3 characters that are left that haven't been revealed, because we know the Walking Dead character, who I used to call Negan, but everybody told me I was mispronouncing that, so I guess it's supposed to be Negan. I'm just joking. I know how it's supposed to be pronounced. But there are 3 characters that we haven't seen yet, and that's the reason we have this guy on the side here, because this is something I learned about quite recently. This character on the side right here is Beau Montana. He's an exclusive Tekken character for the Tekken mobile game, which I'm not interested in and haven't been looking at, but this is like a completely original character for that game. He's like an American football player, quarterback turned like soldier, which is something I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but actually happens in America. It's grounded a little bit more in reality than a lot of characters we get in Tekken, which I think is cool. And it's a really cool original design. It's a little bit of a breath of fresh air. It's not something that we've really seen before. And I think if you already had a cool concept and you have animations for moves that are already in the mobile game, it would make so much sense to actually design this character for implementation in the main game in Tekken 7. And I think that makes so much sense that I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm pretty sure actually that this is going to be one of the 3 characters. I think it would make a lot of sense. So right now my predictions are Julia, Gonryu, and this guy, and I think they're gonna release Julia and Gonryu together and give them a little story thing together in the single player modes, and then maybe it's gonna be this guy Negan for the final patch or whatever. I'm not really sure how and when these releases are gonna happen, but I'm feeling pretty confident that this is going to be one of the characters, and it looks exciting, so I'm looking forward to playing him if we get a chance to. Who knows if that's going to be the case. So I think that's going to wrap up my opinions on Season 2, but to summarize, I think it's been a huge success, and I'm actually having more fun playing Tekken Online right now than I think I've ever had before. I love the changes to my favorite characters. I'm a little bit sad about some changes to other characters, and I really sympathize with those of you out there who feel like the character that you specialize in has been neutered a little bit, because that's never fun. And so I think that's the main criticism most people who dislike Season 2 are going to bring to the table, because overall I think the changes have been a huge success, and it's a lot of fun to play Tekken right now, which is why we have all these big streamer dudes and more people just coming to the game and enjoying it, and it's just a great time to be a Tekken player, and I'm just excited to be a small part of that world right now. So thank you so much for watching the video. If you like Halloween, which I very much do, I'm a huge sucker for Halloween. I love that. I have some special stuff planned for October, so definitely check back in with me in October, and we're going to do some fun Halloween themed stuff with the channel. But for now, thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you guys again very soon.